Hello and welcome to Season 13, Episode 5 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
We are, of course, reading Plato's Republic, the Penguin edition, translated by Sir Desmond Lee, this time talking about Book 4 of the Republic, so talking about the Guardians and the Auxiliaries, and then talking about sort of expanding on what it means for justice to exist in the individual based on what we've described about the state. What did you think of this book? I know your thoughts haven't been the most positive recently.
Well, this is better than last episode, last book, because he's clearly talking about his concept of education and justice and the core values of a good society and good people,
Right.
which is a lot different than silence or else.
That's true.
And his dictatorial tendencies
Yes.
that we addressed, or I addressed, and you praised in the last episode. We were in person.
That's right. Yeah, for the first time
in
since,
a long time.
I guess, July, probably. I don't know if we recorded in August, because I left right at the beginning of August.
That is
for the
correct.
first time in many months.
Live and in person.
No, that's... We're in person, but it's not... Never mind.
We're recording.
This is one of your
live.
worst bits.
It's not a bit.
That, and every time, for all the listeners out there, this doesn't make it into the recording. Every time we're in person, we test the mics, make sure that the levels sound all right. And of course, I fix some things in post too. But he just makes the loudest, most obnoxious noise. I'm the only one with headphones on, so I'm the only one who hears it. And it doesn't help us test the mics at all. It's just a piercing noise right into my ears.
Shall I?
No, you shouldn't.
Let the audience in on our...
Absolutely not.
All right.
And then, of course, once we do start testing the microphones, I say, I'm going to start talking. As soon as I'm done talking, you can start talking. We'll see how it sounds. And then it's just dead silence for at least like 20 seconds. Well, you're laughing the whole time, so it's not really silent, but you're not actually helping test the microphones.
light chuckles.
Yeah. It's just not helpful at all.
Yeah.
All right, so to
Yes.
talk about the Republic. So he starts, the question is raised to Socrates from Andimontis, where he says, how do you answer the objection that you aren't making your guardians particularly happy?
Yes, they're sad. They're just hanging out at their barracks and getting ready.
Right. How do you account for the happiness? How do you account for the justice in those people?
They're not getting paid anymore.
Right.
They can't go on vacation, which is essentially what
Andimontis.
the other guy was saying.
Yes, the other guy. But he says, but Socrates, how he answers that, he says, we're not focusing on the happiness of a particular class. We're focusing on like the goodness of the whole society here. That's sort of how we get into the next topic, this big topic that sort of starts out book 4, which is how do you have this sort of unity present within the state. Right?
This furthers his collectivist philosophy that he doesn't treat anyone as an individual,
Right.
but as only a member of a group, and then the group's a member of the state.
Right. Yes, in this analogy of the state to examine the soul and justice and things like that.
I've changed my mind. Now I hate this chapter as much as I did the last one.
That's good. It didn't take much, I guess.
I was reminded.
Oh my gosh. And so then he kind of talks about, this is on page 122 for us, but around section 422 in all the editions here. But he's talking about, well, what can sort of corrupt, the society? What can ruin unity? What can pull people, to just fighting each other rather than working for the common good? And he says, wealth and poverty. Right? If you have too much of either extreme, then everybody's just going to, fight with each other and try to take what the other person has. So you kind of have to eliminate wealth and poverty to some degree. You have to have some sort of balance, some sort of middle class, it seems like he's kind of proposing here, in order to not just have everybody fighting over everything.
Well, wait.
Yes.
So, yes, he's saying wealth and poverty are the two enemies of a functioning society, but he doesn't talk about them fighting over everything except for like the poverty. Really what he's saying is that you can't live up to your potential if you're in poverty.
Right.
Because you don't have the tools, you don't have the wherewithal to do your best job that you're the best at. And the wealth encourages you to be idle.
Right.
Like you're not driven enough if you've gotten to a certain status in life financially, then you're not going to be as productive.
Right. Yes.
And I agree with what he says.
I agree
think
too.
They're two enemies of successful men.
Right. And then he moves into, I think this is really one of his weakest sort of descriptions here. He's talking about what if you're fighting, a really strong adversary, right? And you're sort of the smaller city state and you're up against two other city states. How would we ever defend against, these bigger cities, these bigger, populations? And he says, well, we just convince one of them to join our side.
Yes.
A little bit of hand waving there, I think a little bit. He says, well, one of them would say, well, we'd persuade them to join us, fight against, the richer, wealthier one, who would be weaker because they're just sitting in luxury all the time and their soldiers aren't as well trained. So I think a little bit of hand waving there as to how exactly the state would survive.
True. But he does mention that, the Guardians would be more effectively trained,
right,
and more focused on fighting, and the wealthy people or the wealthy state that may want to attack you really wouldn't want to have to deal with the Guardians,
right.
And he also does mention, I think at this part he mentions, they always other societies that are not as perfect as the one he would design are always somewhat at war within themselves,
right?
Because they always will have the super wealthy and the poor, and I think he's basically saying, well, you might be able to exploit that, and then get one to ally with you or your this ideal state against the other, and then you defeat one and then the other, or whatever.
And I do think he makes a very good, I think, just generally political point. This is in 423C, page 124 for us. But he says, so we can add to the instructions, we shall give our guardians one to the effect that they are to avoid at all costs either making the state too small or relying on apparent size, but keep it adequate in scale and a unity, right? That unity is much more manageable, at the right size, right? You have to be big enough to accommodate for all the needs of the people, but small enough to avoid just, everything sort of breaking up into factions, right? There has to be some sort of unity, some sort of common purpose between all the people. I think you see that a lot in a lot of like the early American founders, right? You sort of have that idea of the sort of yeoman republic and things like that, where, they're close enough and sort of united in a purpose and things like that. I don't think you can quite say the same thing for America. And I know we've talked about this before, that you need some sort of national project, right? If you have a country this big with so many, tens of millions of people, there has to be some sort of goal that everybody's working towards, Otherwise, what do I have to do with someone who's living on the entire opposite side of a continent from me?
Yeah, I'm really, and I've said this before, I'm convinced that thing is expansionist, the manifest destiny. We've just kind of, we're just consolidated our gains, it seems like.
Right.
I think that's a big problem with it. But I think he's hit on some of the things in his Republic about the educational system, because you mentions, how you can't have a functioning society without properly educating your youth. If you do not preserve, the effective teaching tactics, you end up usurping a functioning society, so it's not functional anymore. Right. But I really do think there's something to the fact that there is no West, or there is no open expanse where the truly adventurous can go and conquer or whatever. And I'm not excusing everything bad that happened, but I'm reading, or not reading, listening to an audiobook about the Comanches, the Empire of the Summer Moon, I think is what it's called.
Interesting.
And it's I think it's probably somewhat favorable to the Comanches' point of view. But it is fair because it talks about the brutality among the Indians and all that sort of thing. But it really is enlightening. But anyway, I think we lost something when we stopped expanding, we stopped growing. I mean, there was a space race, and there's other achievements. And you hear, one of your favorite people, Elon Musk, you hear him talk a lot about, going to the moon and Mars. And at first blush, you're like, well, that's kind of goofy. But I think he's right about something. There's an inherent thing about humanity. You always want to expand and grow and do new things and build things and achieve new adventures and such.
Yeah, he's definitely not right about everything, or I don't even think most things. But
really not about most things. All right, let's go down this rabbit hole. What's wrong with Elon Musk?
Well, I think he is, he's definitely not conservative. He's very much just a libertarian, Very
True.
big sort of technocracy guy. It seems like very big, wants to sort of improve human nature. It seems like very much.
You really get that from him? The improved human nature?
I think he said things that like with Neuralink and stuff like that, we'll be able to overcome all of these different societal problems and things like that because we'll have more access to information, increased tech, increased efficiency. And I don't think that's true at all. I think also he's a very big. I don't know. It seems like he's kind of walked back his stance on this a little bit, but especially when the H-1B stuff was very prominent. He was a very big supporter of H-1B visas when that whole thing was. You think he still is?
Well, he's really changed a lot of his views.
I think so.
Dramatically in the last couple months about unfettered immigration.
Right. But I am still a little wary because I know when that was. I think that was.
Well, of course, that's how he got here.
Right.
He's
of course.
immigrant.
Right.
And a lot of his tech buddies
right.
Came here for that. And those examples are somewhat persuasive to me about the immigration system, even though I'm generally a pretty hard liner on it. I could be convinced to not allow anyone to vacation here. That's how restrictionist I view what our American immigration system should be.
Right.
Maybe let them go to Disney World, or maybe just Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
But in any event, but yeah, I mean, the only other audiobook I've listened to is the Elon Musk biography.
Right.
And he's a fascinating cat. Mm-hmm. He's definitely not perfect. Would be an understatement.
He's got how many kids now? With
I don't think any of them were conceived naturally.
Really?
I think they're all in vitro.
Really?
Maybe one of the early ones, but the vast majority of them are in vitro.
That's wild.
Which is weird. And he had two of them going on at the same time with different ladies.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's not I don't consider him a paragon of virtue, although he did just recently, I think within the last 30 days, admit that he believes in God.
Well, that's a step at least.
But he believes in a creator.
Okay.
Creator God. He's very much into, we need to preserve human consciousness, which is a different concept than the soul, but I think I do think he's trying to work that stuff out.
Yeah,
in a good faith way, I think. And as far as trying to figure out what's the value of humanity, and I think his warnings about AI were important, and nobody was listening to him. And that's the reason why he got into really full throttle into AI, because he thought that somebody that would be responsible, which of course he thinks he's the most responsible person in the world,
of course,
needs to lead the charge, because otherwise they could destroy humanity. Anyway, so
he's definitely interesting. Yeah, I don't think he's the worst person ever exists.
Well, I think he's a net positive.
Yeah,
and I think he's read a lot of philosophy, because he drops little references to serious philosophical thought, and he's really studied a lot of theology too. It seems like
interesting.
Yeah. I mean, he's so smart.
Yeah,
and I don't know if he ever sleeps, so he does a lot of reading.
Yes. Well, speaking of reading,
certainly did. Anyway,
this is a really good point from Plato. This is page 125 for us, but 424 B and C. He says, in a word, therefore, those in charge of our state must stick to the system of education, see that no deterioration creeps in. They must maintain it as a first priority and avoid at all costs any innovation in the established physical or academic curriculum. When they hear someone saying that men pay most attention to the latest song on the singer's lips, they must be afraid that people will think that the poet means not new songs, but a new kind of song, and that is what he is recommending. Yep. But such innovation should not be recommended, nor should the poet be so understood. You should hesitate to change the style of your literature, because you risk everything if you do. The music and literature of a country cannot be altered without major political and social changes. We have Damon's word for it, and I believe him. And I think that is spot on, right? If you start just throwing out, everything that makes a culture,
yes.
Or just trying to update it, trying to, make it more relevant to the modern time, but then all of a sudden you're dealing with a very different culture, you're dealing with a very different people.
Yeah,
so I think he's spot on there.
Yeah, and he's also making a somewhat basic point about education, just the system of education, and this has been, I think, the biggest tragedy in modern times, maybe, but certainly a top 5 in America, which is the complete failure of our educational system, especially for the poor. And I think it's Mississippi that just made huge strides in gains in reading and test scores, and it's because they went back to phonics,
right?
Just to learn how to read. And like I was on a school board 25 years ago, and every year, I was only out for 4 years. Every year they had this, we're starting this new curriculum and they're phasing this in. And then my mom was a teacher, my sister was a teacher, and your mother was a teacher. And she was always getting these new classes on how to teach. And I even said then, you're a kindergarten teacher. Don't we already know how to teach that level? Like, what's the new way to teach?
They're not dropping new letters of the alphabet.
Yeah, there's only so many letters, and they're only going up in so many numbers.
Right.
Is it really a new, better way? And it really hasn't been.
Right.
And I hate that we have computers in the classroom. There's no reason to have a single computer in a classroom in an elementary school. Period.
Right.
But I think he's right about this. That you can have change in your educational system should be looked at and presumed to be that it's undermining the effectiveness of education. But first, you have to have a good system,
right?
And I think we need to obviously kind of go back to basics and start over. And then once you have it in there, the whole thing is, let's see. Like he said, I think it was on 127, maybe.
I was going to say right after that, there's another good exchange. Literally right after the quote I read, it says, "And so it is here in education that our guardians must build their main defenses."
Yes.
And then he replies, "It is an education that disorder can most easily creep in unobserved." Yes, I agreed, because people treat it as child's play and think no harm can come of it. And Adimantus says, well, of course, there's a lot of harm that can come of it. You shouldn't just ignore it. And I think that has been a big problem. And I think that was what it seems like to me, a lot of parents realized, like during COVID, when you had all the online classes and all of a sudden you're sitting in on what teachers are telling your kids, and it's like, oh, that's what you've been doing for the past 8 years of your life, where it's like, I had no idea that this is what you were teaching, and you just kind of put it on the back burner, just assume that everything's being taught normally and properly, and no weird things are creeping in. He says, well, obviously, education is where all of this rot can creep in the easiest.
Yes, thank you for bringing up my favorite subject.
Oh, you're welcome.
I've refrained from mentioning it.
Well, that wasn't really an invitation.
Episodes. It is. Because you are 100% correct. And what it really revealed, among a lot of things, is how little our teachers across this country value their own students. It was always, we love the children and teachers are the heroes. No, they sacrificed the youth for their safety, security, and laziness. There's two. I know there's exceptions, and there'd be a couple of teachers here and there that would have gone into the fire or whatever and risked the cold. But the vast majority of them were fighting to shut down schools and they weren't even working remotely. There were some that, like your mother, tried. She was teaching during the earlier months of the COVID shutdowns, but so many of them were just cashing a check. And that was my proposal to end the shutdowns is, okay, if the government shut down, the government workers shouldn't get paid.
Right.
If they would have just said that, the schools would open up the next week.
Right.
But it revealed the duplicity.
Right.
And then all of a sudden people are like, wait a second, what are these people doing to my kids? And why does that, like a lot of us don't even know what our teachers look like, our kids' teachers. And we're like, wait a second, this nut job has, piercings all over her face. and she calls herself Jane, but she looks like Steve. And then I was like, wait a second. And then a lot of it was, if they could work remotely, and then it's like, why am I sending my kids to these people?
Right.
And so the homeschool really took off, I think. Anyway, so our we're really, because of advances by people like Elon Musk and others, we are on the cusp of a huge revolution in education.
I hope so.
Because we are finding that we don't need schools.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, don't need schools, especially for college level courses. If you're self motivated, you can learn a lot of this stuff without a professor. I don't think that's ideal,
right?
But I think for a lot of skills and a lot of courses, it's going to be democratized.
Right. And it also speaks poorly on our professors, because ideally you should be able to get things from a professor that you couldn't get anywhere else, right? That's the purpose of education.
Yeah, but what's the difference? Like if I if I sit in a lecture hall and I watch a lecture by, let's say, Victor Davis Hanson, a great professor, and I've seen some of his stuff. Does it make a difference if I read the book and I take that lecture online recording versus being there in person? I mean, I guess I could ask him questions.
I think on like a superficial level, I think you would be more easily pay attention and things like that. But I think broadly, I think that's a big problem, is that so many classes, like, you never actually talk to the professor, right? You're in a room with 300 other people.
So why wouldn't you just record that once?
Right.
And then you don't have to pay that teacher again.
Which goes back to a point I think we've talked about a lot
eternity.
More. Yeah, that there should be fewer people in college. Period. There should be less people, smaller classes.
Or everybody's in college. You just don't go to college.
Exactly. Yes.
I mean, why do you need to have a degree? Why do you have to have a degree in art history, for Christ's sake?
Yeah.
Why do you, like, I had a degree in philosophy. Why is that required? Well, I had to have a degree in undergrad to be able to admit into law school. Well, why do I have to go to law school? Because I have to, in order to be admitted to the bar, I have to graduate from an accredited law school. And the law school can't be accredited unless they require people to have bachelor's degrees before they even enter in. Right. It's a big scam.
Right. Which I think there's a lot of countries, especially in Europe, where the law school is like the college education. Yeah. Where it is like the undergraduate sort of level.
And our system used to be apprenticeships.
Right. Which are much more effective at teaching things like that.
God, you aren't even kidding me. Anyway.
But yes.
Down with the patriarchy. I mean,
sure.
Law schools or something.
But then moving
Plato
on.
has some good stuff in here. It's not just about my opinions about COVID and stuff. He's right on. So this is actually a good chapter.
Yes.
Or book or whatever.
He as he turns, after education, he also kind of carves out religion, though. This is at the weird sort of parts that this edition is set up in. This is at the very end of part 4.
Well, wait a second.
Yes.
You didn't get into we have too many laws. Because he talks about if you have a good society, you don't need to legislate everything.
Right. No, that's
and I think that the corollary is bureaucracy. They didn't have a concept of bureaucracy, but I guess anyway. He says good men need no orders. They will find out easily enough what legislation is in general necessity. And he says, he's talking about you don't need all these laws to make everything illegal. Otherwise, he said, they will spend their whole time making and correcting detailed regulations of the sort you've described, always expecting to achieve perfection. I mean, that I should put that on a wall somewhere in every city hall, actually. Although the cities are not as bad as the state and federal governments. But, they're always trying to, we have to improve the regulations. Like this whole healthcare debate they're having now. Well, Obamacare subsidies. Well, we just got to tweak it. We just got to, no.
Right. Well, going back to the point about education, all the law's there, right? Why do you need, to have this undergrad degree, to go to this law school, to be accredited, to, go and take the bar exam? There's not really much of a reason, because if you just studied on your own and took the bar exam, you would be just as qualified as anyone else, assuming you passed the bar.
Yeah. I'll tell you the reason. You want to know the reason?
Please.
Because lawyers want to limit the supply of lawyers. Right. Because if we had more lawyers, it would drive down our income. Right. If you double the number of lawyers, all of a sudden, I'm not making as much money. but I think you have to go to college, you have to go to law school, and then you still have like the bar passage rate. Of course, in recent years, I don't know. I shouldn't condemn some, the generation behind me, But the bar passage rate is like 70-something%. So that means over 20% of the people that have gone to college, gone to law school, and sit for the exam don't pass. And then you're never a lawyer.
Right.
You've wasted 7 years. Literally. And then what are you going to do? I guess be a waiter? I don't know. Or maybe be happy. Yeah, that's the solution. You got to get a job you might enjoy. But what was I going to say? I was going to say something else that I got distracted by that.
I don't know.
Oh, well.
Wow. It'll come to you.
Yeah, I got full of rants tonight.
You sure do. He makes the interesting point there, too, after he talks about, there's too many laws. This is at the top of page 129 for us. But he says, then what have we left to do in the way of legislation? Yes. I replied that there was nothing indeed for us to do ourselves. But, I said, there remain for Apollo and the Delphic oracle laws of the highest importance and value to make. And he essentially kind of carves out religious laws. He says those are more important. Those are higher. The state shouldn't really be concerned with those. They should be higher than the state. They have sort of precedence there. That is for them to decide, and we're sort of bound to this higher sort of decree when they're made from the religious authority. I thought that was really interesting.
It kind of plays in natural law, Greek mythology style.
Yeah, exactly. But then we turn to, this is, in the Penguin edition, this starts the next part where we start talking about really what does this mean for justice in the state, and then how do we compare that to the individual here. So the question sort of comes up again. So we've described this whole state, described all these problems. Where is justice? That's what we set out to do. And he says, well, Glaucon says, you promised to deal with the problem yourself because you said it would be wicked for you to not give justice all the support of which you were capable. Essentially saying, well, you've said you'd do this and you haven't done this for so long. You've been talking about everything besides the thing.
We're now on part 5.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But he says, he talks about knowledge and wisdom and each sort of going to its own part and things like that.
This is where I really enjoyed this part of it, where he's talking about like the 4 virtues.
Yes, exactly.
Wisdom, courage, self-discipline, and justice. And I really appreciated, how the conversation went in here. And of course, now it's not an argument or a debate. It's like they're just facilitating his point of view, which was getting me earlier.
Yes.
Like, somebody yell at him and tell him to stop censoring people. But this was pretty good. So he addresses wisdom first. And he just says, it's basically the ability to have judgment, and appreciate things in that manner. So he doesn't really go into that too much.
He does, though, importantly, sort of for this whole analogy, right, where he says, wisdom is, sort of associated with the guardians, right? They're the smallest group, right? They have the sort of highest, knowledge of things, right? Wisdom is correlated with them. That is where we see wisdom in the state, where they plan out everything. They sort of run everything, from the top, right? That is where wisdom is seen in the state.
And he talks about courage. He says courage is sort of safekeeping, like that you have the courage to uphold your values, I guess,
right?
And then he talks about the soldier class,
right,
and educating them physically and mentally to have that courage,
right?
So that was
exactly
a good discussion.
Right. So,
and then ordinary citizens' courage, to be proper people within society, and all that.
Right.
And I really liked his discussion of self-discipline,
right?
Where is a kind of order, a control of certain desires and appetites, so people are use being master of oneself, whatever that means. And similar phrases as indications of it. Isn't that so? And he goes on and on. So that he puts that in as such a strong element or quality for a just state. Right,
because he says where you see this self-discipline is everybody recognizing sort of their own position.
Yeah.
Right, if you're sort of in the worker, you're not trying to usurp, the guardians up top, right? You recognize that there's an order to things, that there's sort of a common, progression or common good, and that's where you see self-discipline, everybody doing the task that they ought to do. And that is how sort of this unity is found. That's where you see self-discipline within the state. But then he says,
do you agree with that?
I think there's
part of self-discipline,
some truth to it. I don't think it's, everybody should just blindly do, what they're told to do.
Well, that's not what he's saying.
That's not what he's saying. Yeah, I know. But I'm sort of talking about extremes here. I think it is, there is sort of that golden mean of recognizing that there is a role for you to play in the society, and you shouldn't try to do everything. That doesn't mean you shouldn't, stand up if you see that somebody's doing something else wrong, and that you might be able to do it better than them if you have reason to believe that, right? Maybe you could try and take on their job or things like that, but recognizing that you have a particular spot, you have a particular station, and that without everybody sort of doing as they ought, there is sort of the unity of the whole thing.
And referencing one of my favorite authors, Victor Davis Hanson. I haven't listened to his podcast in a while. I got kind of like angry old manish, and I have enough of that in my own life, just from me. But he used to say this, like when he's talking about like conservative movement type people, and he was a real strong advocate for everybody doing each according to their station. So if you're if you're elected to the city council, well, then you have that position. You should use that position to improve your town and your community and advance those principles. If you're not elected that, then maybe you can volunteer for something. It's like everybody has a role to play. And I think that's really what Plato is saying. And it's not necessarily like you're going to be pigeonholed and you're stuck, but you need to find, your talent and your station within society that best serves you and serves everybody else according to your talent and your abilities. I think that's what he's saying. And I agree with that, but I get this feel like he would be putting people, well, if you're a soldier, you can only do this. And he is kind of saying that if you're a good cobbler, shoe maker, then you're going to be stuck making shoes your whole life. Right. And I think he kind of means that. Yeah. Like if you're really talented at it, but you're miserable, and he really firmly believes he can only do one good thing, one thing well. And I don't know that that's true. In fact, I know that's not true. Right. But anyway.
But then he says, so kind of after self-discipline, well, where's justice, right? What is justice here? It kind of really seems very much related more so to self-discipline is what he talks about here. Yes. But he says justice is essentially, sort of the mutual agreements between everybody not interfering with everybody else.
Yeah, mind your own business.
Exactly, yeah. Or it's everybody doing what they ought to do. Yeah. So it's kind of, we talked about the traditional definition of justice is giving to each their due. He kind of seems to like flip it a little bit, where he's like, well, it's everybody doing what they ought to do, rather than doing what they not ought to do, doing something else that is beyond them, right? That is where justice is found, is every sort of thing sort of working in cohesion, right? Based on this self-discipline, recognizing your place and the courage and the wisdom, all of those things sort of coming together. That is where you find justice, is everybody doing as they ought.
Yeah, and I think he's very much right about one thing. It's like you see some discussions in recent times about a high trust society. Like you can leave your, is it Japan? Or they also talk about like some of the Middle Eastern countries where they brag about, well, you could leave your wallet on the table and be gone for an hour and it'll still be there. Probably because they kill you if you stole a wallet. But I mean, whatever works. No, not whatever works. But in a society that everybody's doing what they ought to do, you don't have that worry about theft. And like, there's still communities in rural Missouri where people will leave, stop at the store and leave the keys in the ignition, so to speak. I mean, you'd have to have a old car to have a key that actually is in an ignition, right. But or they keep their front doors unlocked or whatever. Right. And that's a sign of a society where generally people are all doing what they should be doing, which is not breaking in and stealing stuff from each other or beating each other up or whatever. And I think there's a lot of truth to that for a just society.
Yeah, I agree. But then he says, okay, we've talked about sort of the state, and now we have to go back to what we were talking about originally in the first place. How is the individual just? Yes. He says, well, let's try and transfer everything we've talked about into the individual. And this is where he talks about sort of what I was talking about last time about, well, how does this relate to sort of the faculties of the soul, sort of the different aspects of how we live out our lives and things like this. But he says, we shall expect to find that the individual has the same three elements in his personality and to be justified in using the same language of him because he is affected by the same conditions, as the state here. But he says, first, I'm trying to remind myself where his argument begins here. He goes into this discussion of like, you can't really have opposites at the same time. Yes. Right. In sort of what the mind is doing and things like that. You can't be in an opposite action or state of being.
The attraction and revulsion at the same time. Right. Where I think it's a 144. He's talking about opposite actions or states and all that. Yeah.
And so he says, so these must be different sort of competing things then, right? It's not all just one sort of homogenous thing, because he says, what about hunger and thirst, right? Where it's you have this sort of this impulse or this desire, but sometimes you sort of reject that desire. So there's some like competing things going on. There must be different sort of operations happening there. It must be different components maybe of one thing, but it's not all just one sort of the same gray blob, right? We can distinguish different parts of what people do and desire and things like that. But he says, everybody desires sort of what is good for them and things like that. You'll desire sort of the greatest good naturally. It says knowledge has a certain kind of object, et cetera, et cetera. Talks a lot about thirst. I forgot just how much he talked about thirst here.
I think I guess it really just comes down to having that self-discipline and that harmony of the appetites,
right.
And you have the combination of those elements, and that's somehow a just person, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, he says, sort of distinguishing the things, right, that there is sort of the appetite, right, just the general feeling of thirst, that you have this appetite, or it's not even really something that you focus on, or something that you desire distinctly, right, that is sort of, we can view as the appetite, right, you just have this desire towards thirst. But he says, well, there's also this indignation. In Greek, is this thumos, right? Anger, indignation, sort of spirit, sort of talks about kind of, I think sort of the closest analog would be like the will, right? Sort of a more active thing that can oppose our desires and things like that. And then, of course, the final part is then the reason, sort of above these things. Sort of the analogy he draws is that, of course, the guardians, that highest class, that's the wisdom, it's the reason in the soul. The auxiliaries are the will, this indignation, the spirit, which can carry out either what the reason desires or what the appetites desire. And so the appetites are sort of just the common people, right, who don't really factor into the ruling of the state, right? They're part of it, very much so, but it's up to the reason and sort of the will to guide the passions, to overcome the passions. And that is sort of where we find justice, is right when you have a rightly ordered soul, when you are desiring the correct things and using your reason to determine what the correct things are, and using your will to pursue the correct things. That is sort of what the soul is. That is sort of what justice is in the individual. It seems like, according to Plato here.
Yeah, and he finally comes down to the ultimate question of, is it better to be just or unjust?
Right.
Which I think his main argument in this, unless I missed something else, was that, well, if you're a properly balanced individual, it's healthier for you. Mm-hmm. And healthy activities produce health, and unhealthy activities produce sickness, which his interlocutor agrees with. Is this, well, then don't just actions produce justice, and unjust actions produce unjust, and they must. So he makes the argument, well, you'll be happier. And I think somewhere, I don't know where it's at, if it's right at the back end or if it's before that. Well, he mentions that, well, if you're unhealthy, no matter how wealthy you are, you don't care. If you can have all the food to eat in the world, but if you're not, but if you're ill, you're on death's door, you're just complete in pain all the time. It doesn't matter.
Page 155 for us, section 445A. But he says, I think we've already shown the question to be absurd one, Socrates, he replied. Men don't reckon that life is worth living when their physical health breaks down, even though they have all the food and drink and wealth and power in the world. So we can hardly reckon it worth living when the natural principle by which we live breaks down in confusion, and a man of his own choice avoids the one thing that will rid him of wickedness and injustice, the acquisition of justice and excellence, now that they have been clearly shown to be as we have described them. And it's interesting how he kind of phrases that, right? Sort of the natural principle, where he almost says, like, we sort of naturally know what it means to be just, what it naturally means to just sort of live in harmony. We recognize, we shouldn't just be, giving into the appetites all the time, right? That we should have the reason sort of guiding us, right? We should be using the will and sort of pursuit of reason and things like that. Not that was really interesting, right? So it's like, if you are living in harmony sort of with yourself, if your sort of desires are ordered and things like that, you're not living in disorder. Well, yeah, of course you'll be happier. You will be a more fulfilled person. Your life will be better, even if you don't have all the money and power and food and whatever, but because you know that you are doing as you ought, then it is good to be just.
Yeah.
And I think that's true.
Yeah, and you see a lot of examples, like with the really gross wealthy and like celebrities. They get all the money and they're miserable, which I used to be surprised by, but now that I'm in my 50s, I'm like, no, I can see that.
Right.
It's like you get there and then you're like, why did I go through all that for this? Mm-hmm. This is not good. What was the movie? I just watched a movie about
the Santa Claus.
No, it was actually that was a good movie. No, it was a different movie. I just watched.
I don't know.
With George Clooney. What's it called? He basically kind of plays himself. Really good movie. It was just out in theaters a couple weeks ago. It's J something. So it's like his character's name is the name of the movie, and he plays a famous celebrity actor that's his age, of course, and he's at the pinnacle of his career, but he has no real romantic relationship, and he's estranged, especially from one daughter, and somewhat from his other daughter, and doesn't get along with his dad. And his friends don't seem to really be his friends, and the question is, was it worth it?
Right.
And it doesn't beat you over the head with it. It's kind of a little bit of a comedy. Mm-hmm. He does a great job, and I'm not a huge George Clooney fan, but some of his movies are really good. This one's good, and Up in the Air. Have you ever seen that one?
No.
That's an excellent movie. Similar themes,
really,
where he plays a. I think I mentioned to you before. He plays a guy that his job is to go around the country and lay off people.
Yes, yeah, you absolutely told me about that.
Yeah, and so I find that part of it really compelling for some reason.
It's your dream job.
But he's again kind of compartmentalized his personal life. And anyway, but he does a really, really good job in both movies. And well written, and he does a great job acting. Anyway, so the point is, after all those segues, is I think there's really something to that for people that even when you have all the success in the world, if you don't have a well ordered life, you're still miserable. It doesn't solve that problem. And so I think Plato would use those as modern day examples of what he's saying.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Well, do you have any other final thoughts? He kind of ends this book kind of giving a hint at what he's going to talk about next. He says, there's different types of state, monarchy and aristocracy, and, what do these look like in practice? It seems like it'll be the next discussion for us coming up.
Well, I thought this part of the book was excellent.
Yeah.
And it's fun to be able to, of course I read it before, but like learn from a guy who was writing this 2,000 years ago, and it's still resonates.
Like 2,500 years ago at this point.
Yes, correct. Yeah, 2,500.
2,400.
So what are your thoughts?
No, I really enjoyed it. I think this kind of proves me right a little bit in our discussion from last time.
No. That does not prove you anything.
All right.
Because this is a completely different subject.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll let all of our many viewers decide, and they can tweet at us and let us know who they agree with.
One of your listeners was acting like you won the debate.
That's true.
Last week.
Yes.
And whatever.
No, I agree. I do enjoy this one more than the last book. I think this is really where we get to what exactly is justice finally, after describing all of these things. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember what else he talks about going forward. I'm hoping that all of your least favorite parts were in the last one, and that we won't uncover. Okay. No? Okay.
No. Like the whole cave thing.
Oh, you don't like the allegory? Okay, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I vague recollections.
Well, I guess we'll see if you still really dislike it going into next time.
Mouth reading this.
That's absurd. No, I really enjoyed it. I think he's absolutely right. I don't know if I 100% agree with sort of how he changes things. I do still think sort of the traditional definition of giving to each his due is correct. But I think the way he describes it is sort of in line with what other people kind of think of justice as. I think he's right that you have to sort of order your soul, be pursuing the right things, and that is very much part of justice. What he talks about here.
Well, it's like I guess to agree with part of your argument last week. It's kind of like how favorable you view or read it. How much grace you give to him and how he's describing his thoughts. Mm-hmm. Are you reading it in the light most favorable to the author?
Right.
Or are you taking a really critical eye? And I think last week I was taking a lot more critical eye than you were. I mean, just in the perspective.
Well, clearly. I think that's why, it's still being read and discussed, after 2,500 years, as everybody can take something away from it, right? They're still talking about these very important things.
Yeah. I agree with that on some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good thought to end on.
I think, I really believe like it's overrated. But I think it's really important.
Yes.
Because it was so early on and it articulates so many things well.
Yeah.
But then it goes on these other crazy things,
Right. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about more of the crazy things in the future.
Yes.
This has been season 13, episode 5, I believe, of Unlimited Opinions. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions. Let us know if you want any free matches.
Yes.
Just tweet at us at ULMTD Opinions.
If you want to suggest any other giveaways.
Yes, that's right.
And then the Christmas spirit.
Good. All right. Well, this has been season 13, episode 5 of Unlimited Opinions. I have been Adam Bishop.
Still Mark Bishop.